Joining us now is Dan Senor. He's a Republican strategist and former senior advisor to the Romney-Ryan presidential campaign. Dan, good to see you.
Good morning, guys.
Let's start with the budget. Some of the programs the Trump administration is looking to cut, Republicans have been pushing for many, many years, but he and the administration is already getting pushback from GOP members of Congress. What do you think will be most problematic with this blueprint?
Two things. At a macro level, at a very big picture, it goes after spending programs that aren't causing the real problem in our debt and deficit. And if you take Social Security and Medicare off the table, entitlement spending, which this president has done, then you are left and you want to increase defense spending, which I'm for, then you are left with the only cuts you can make are in domestic discretionary spending programs like these ones that have become the subject of criticism. But the numbers are not that substantial. You're talking about a 1.35% shift in a $4 trillion budget from the domestic spending programs to defense spending. It's not that big a deal. But the individual cuts in these individual programs, like Meals on Wheels, they become easy to focus in on and sound really bad. Mm-hmm. And I don't believe Republicans on Capitol Hill were socialized by the administration about this budget, getting them on board, getting them to understand the arguments, and so therefore they're not holding together.
It's part of the problem too with this document, or call it a document, is that I know it's a skinny budget, but it also doesn't include a lot of components that would have been in documents similar to this in previous administrations. So it's got to be challenging for lawmakers to really weigh in on whether they like it or not.
A presidential budget is always kind of like a political document in that the president sends his budget to Capitol Hill, and then Congress does their own budget, and they begin their appropriations process, and they begin the individual appropriations bills. And the president's budget doesn't actually have to be passed. It's the House and Senate that have to get their budgets in line respectively and get something passed.
Right.
So, and then the appropriations bills the president has assigned to law. So the president's budget as a starting point is not as consequential as people might think.
But how does
this one in particular is thin. And as you say, low on, sort of slim on details.
Right.
And so I think it is therefore going to be treated even with less focus than normally would be by a new president. And the congressional Republicans are going to move quickly to their own budget. However, it does force congressional Republicans to have to respond to this budget. So this budget calls for about a third cuts in the State Department, which is substantial. Substantial for any organization, especially for State Department. Never had cuts like this proposed. So now Rex Tillerson's going to go on Capitol Hill and testify and present the president's budget. And Republicans now are going to have to publicly distance themselves from the president's spending priorities. Is it a big deal in the scheme of things? No. But in the near term, when they have 1,000 things going on, like, oh, by the way, trying to get health care reform passed, and then after that trying to get tax reform passed, the goal is to minimize distractions, minimize sideshows, not expand them. And the budget fight now could become a distraction.
Well, something else that's happening today, the president is meeting with German Chancellor Angela Merkel.
Yeah.
He has criticized her in the past. He's criticized NATO. She is not known as a shrinking violet, as you well know. Do you see her taking on the president in a meeting like this, even if it's behind closed doors, but sort of laying down the law with him as far as Europe's concerns and as far as Germany's concerns specifically? And do you think that the things that the president has said in the past may damage ultimately in the long run the relationship we have with
I don't think so for two reasons. One, while Trump has been very critical of Merkel and NATO in the past, if you look at the statements that Vice President Pence has made, that General Secretary Mattis has made, that Secretary Tillerson has made, as these members of the president's cabinet have traveled to Europe, the Munich Security Conference where Pence spoke and Mattis spoke. I mean, they've been out in Europe making the case for the transatlantic alliance. They've been making the case for NATO. So they've kind of moved away from the president's rhetoric during the campaign. That's the first thing. The second thing is we need Germany. It's in America's interest. We need, for a whole host of reasons, for security reasons. They are on the front lines of a lot of the, terrorist threats that are facing the West in terms of the flows of migrants from the Middle East into Europe. Collaboration at the intelligence level to security level is really important. I think what the president of the United States is now, which he didn't have the benefit of at that point during the campaign, is now seeing the intelligence on a daily basis. He recognizes how important our relationship is with the German government and specifically Merkel. And she is facing a very tough election in the next few months. She could lose. She's got a very tough election, and it'll be a center-left candidate who defeats her if she fails. And he has to think, how much of a hard time does he want to give her?
Real quickly, somebody posited, a political analyst has suggested that the president is meeting with the leader of the free world today. Do you see the United States ceding that position, given that the president has talked about an America first policy? It doesn't mean that we're not the most powerful country in the world or wealthiest or the one with the most opportunities, but when it comes to leading, perhaps Germany or maybe even another country may take that role.
I think Merkel continues to play the dominant role in terms of the economic and financial security and stability of Europe. But that's it. At the end of the day, Germany has no real military to speak of, no real defense budget to speak of, and no real capacity to act internationally outside the borders of continental Europe. Only the United States can play that role, project forces, project power around the world. And so it is true that Trump is talking about retreating to some degree from that, but I just don't think the German government has the capacity to fill the vacuum.
All right, Dan Senor, thank you.
Good to be with you guys.